Mamuralia by Art Robin. In ancient Roman religion, the Mamuralia, Sacrum Mamurio, or Rite for Mamurius, was a festival held on March 15th, named only in sources from late antiquity. The name is connected to Mamurius Veturius, who, according to tradition, was the craftsman who made the ritual shields, or encelia, that hung in the Temple of Mars. Because the Roman calendar originally began in March, the Mamuralia is usually regarded as a ritual marking the transition from the old year to the new. From Wikipedia. Chapter 1. Just got off the interstate. Might lose service. Love you much. I hope you're comfortable in the new house. See you in 3 days. The southern Kentucky sunset spread flat like a saucer overhead, vivid orange against the charcoal purple sky sketching the horizon beyond the winding road. John Michael Jennings pulled back onto Route 185 North after sending the text message, dropping his cell phone in the middle console. A guitar, backpack, and a full grocery bag sat in the back seat. Love in the Time of Cholera lay crosswise in the passenger seat to his right. Clothing hung down over the rear passenger window. It was Friday, March 13th, 2020. On the radio, 2 people were arguing about COVID-19. A nasty bug, statistically sparing, at least from what they could tell, but contagious enough that a national emergency had just been declared. His phone buzzed. Love you too. Lee says he misses you. The house is... It'll be better when we're all unpacked. Enjoy your retreat. The sunset descended into soft white, summoning the onset of a deceptive and dusky haze. He turned off the radio to try and relax. Pandemics never affect America, he said. I almost fell for the Ebola scare, though, he chuckled. The remains of his fast food dinner wafted up from the brown paper bags littering the floorboards. He exhaled audibly and sat back in his seat as the outskirts of Bowling Green diminished behind him into the rearview mirrors. Oceanic contours of farmland dappled with horses, cattle, and sheep flew through his peripheral vision, punctuated by thick patches of woodland, occasionally obscuring the view. His pulse quickened and his stomach stirred as the solemnity of the land set in. Testing the rental car, he stepped on the gas, anticipating every stray twig, leaf, or pebble that lay on the road in front of him, hugging every curve with a merciless grip on the steering wheel. The highway was wide open. The narrow road was a cottonmouth cutting through the woods and winding over every hill. An oversized pickup truck soon descended on John Michael's bumper, though he was going well over the speed limit. He leaned hard into a blind curve surrounded by dense woods, surprising a deer and missing her by inches. Her hooves clattered as they failed to find traction on the asphalt. When they looked at each other in a single flash of time, he saw no fear in her wide, chestnut brown eyes. He pictured the accident in his head repeatedly, heart pounding, imagining who would find him and how long it would take them to get in touch with his family in Nashville. The truck behind him backed off. Miles fell away behind him. The street lights started to thin and die out somewhere around the junction of Route 70. John Michael was alone in a sea of gray, until a worn-out minivan shrouded in a cloud of dust swung lethargically out from a driveway a few hundred feet ahead, forcing him to slam on the brakes. Its license plate had been obscured with spray paint. The driver waved an apologetic greeting out the window before rolling up the glass and maintaining a steady 30 miles per hour to spite the open highway. Exhaust poured liberally out of the blackened tailpipe, the undercarriage sagging low over the road. The abbreviated reach of the headlamps glowed teal and white through the dense crops on both sides of the road, mirroring the monotonous crawl of the 2 vehicles. Strangely, the driver accelerated as soon as John Michael attempted to pass on the left, black exhaust exploding from the rear of the van. The driver slowed to a near halt soon after, and John Michael white-knuckled the steering wheel. His breathing grew rapid. He watched the doors and windows of the van for movement, involuntarily checking his phone. No signal. The van slowly returned to its easy pace, a mad black beetle dumbly traversing the lawn of the gods, before finally turning off onto a gravel road. The journey grew uncomfortably still as John Michael accelerated anxiously up the highway, without a soul in sight. The open land was as wrinkled as an old woman's skin, passing away under the last light of the day. John Michael scanned the black skies, trying to get in tune with this new country, seeing nothing. Route 185 ran out at Caneyville. He drove through town to catch Route 79, seeing hardly anyone. The town's seclusion lay naked in artificial light like an unguarded moment into which he was crudely trespassing. He saw signs towards the parkway, the safest shot back home, back to the house. He feared an ugly fear around here. Maybe it was best to follow his gut. But he drove on, being so close to his destination and, he hoped, a refuge of long-needed peace, solitude, escape. He arrived at the state park 20 minutes before their dining room closed. He went straight in with a smile and a wave. No response. "Where's the bar?" Disappointed to learn it was closed, he ordered a catfish platter to go and sat at a nearby table, absent-mindedly drawing patterns in the pliant red carpet with his foot. "Bar closed on a Friday night?" he muttered. A handful of restaurant staff were hurrying about, finishing their closing duties. News of the pandemic was bouncing loudly off of the wood-paneled walls from a radio near the cash register. John Michael went out of his way to appear friendly, but he was the last customer of the day, and no one in the suffocating room felt like making eye contact. The kitchen manager, dressed in khakis and a button-down shirt, announced John Michael's order, his otter's eyes betraying his anxiety from under a head of thick blonde hair. He dutifully approached and set the meal down, touching only the corners of the box, before taking an exaggerated step back away from the table, asking if there was anything else, and retreating through the swinging aluminum doors. John Michael smiled, raised his eyebrows, and glanced around the room, shaking his head with a laugh. Checking in at the front desk, John Michael mentioned the drive up Route 185. "I got in a bad wreck on them curves," the clerk responded, applying an alarming portion of hand sanitizer. "I don't take that way no more." Watching her fill out his paperwork with jilted movements and rushed handwriting, her darting eyes wide and awake, he began to understand. Fear was a pandemic too. He headed back to unwind in his room with tired eyes and an uneasy stomach. "Safe and sound at the lodge," he typed before pressing send. Rain moved in from the west and began to envelop the buildings in a shiny film, orange from the glow of the street lamps. Room 259 was modest. It seemed somewhat neglected, but there was plenty of light. The carpet was crimson red like that of the dining room. The stale air smelled of cleaning solution. "Thank God," he said when he saw the back patio, thinking of a debate he had had with his wife when they first started dating, regarding whether or not it was necessary to lock the patio door of a hotel room when it wasn't on ground level. While his wife had leaned on the side of security, John Michael had argued, "If anyone is ambitious enough to scale the exterior wall of a hotel just to test whether my door is locked or not, out of all the rooms to choose from, they've earned the right to come in." "Please change the bed linens," said the card sitting on the bedside table by the phone. He picked it up and read the fine print, confirming it was not an instruction from the housekeeping staff, but for them, should he wish to place the sign on the bedding. He flipped the card over. On the back side of the sign, he discovered a hand-drawn, ballpoint pen sketch of a goblin. Cat ears, humanoid face, blank, empty eyes, and a tiny mouth nestled between a sparse set of whiskers smiling suspiciously. The way the creature's mouth was drawn seemed distinctly human, oddly contrasting the whiskers and ears, bringing life to the rough sketch. John Michael quickly put the card in the bedside table drawer and closed it. His mouth had grown dry. He turned on some music. An unintelligible exclamation came immediately from somewhere through the walls. The cold spring rain was unyielding, draining loudly out of the gutter just overhead and splattering on the rocks below. Sitting outside on the upstairs porch, he saw how vastly empty the lodge was. Not a single interior light was on in any of the rooms in the adjacent buildings. He felt uncomfortably uprooted and alone. He tapped his foot restlessly, unable to relax. His nose grew numb from the cold. Small animals rustled in the leaves in the woods down below. Even further past that, he thought he saw movement on the dock through the trees, but it was just the shadows from the pier lights bouncing through the windows of a vacant waterfront building. Suddenly, he heard something moving through the trees towards the sidewalk. It was big. He stood up to look but saw nothing. He listened closely. Steps. Walking. Growing louder, shuffling, one after another. "That is not a deer," he said and hurried inside, locking the door to the porch, unable to laugh at himself for his impulsive panic. John Michael turned in for the night, curtains closed and lights on in room 259. He fell asleep instantly, but then awakens. He sits up in bed and looks around the fully lit room, seeing a reflection of himself in the large mirror on the wall, wearing a face mask and a hospital gown. The warm tungsten light from his bedside lamp casts a sickly glow on the blood-red walls. A dead hum pierces the air, permeating his skull, buzzing incessantly through the metal frame of the bed. He looks to his right. 3 figures are standing with their backs to him along the wall. Women he sees looking closer, wearing scrubs, hypnotized by their work preparing gloves, needles, and pills. He smells a hint of strong soap and iodine before closing his eyes and falling into a black abyss. Hours pass. Just before dawn, it begins. He is familiar with the recurring dream. The plane bucks violently in its descent. Bright morning light pours through the windows. Crew members and other passengers are standing up, walking around, talking calmly. There is no sound. But this dream is different. This time his doctor, a specialist in cardiology, sits next to him wearing his starched white jacket, eyes clear and blue. He looks to be a younger version of himself, marked by a long, blossoming beard, which John Michael only faintly remembers from childhood. "You need to take special precaution from this virus because of your pre-existing condition," says his doctor as the blue depths of the ocean grow closer out the window behind him. "Here's your escape pack." He hands him 2 oxygen tanks with masks, connected to some kind of digital control panel. The pressure of the gas can be utilized to create a jet propulsion of sorts. Make sure it's strapped on tight. Oh, and here are your full medical records, of course. His doctor hands him a thick packet. John Michael begins to thumb through it, mostly standard medical histories and prescriptions, with detailed minutes from a surgical procedure here and there. Then, going deeper, he finds photocopies of an old book. Long, strange passages of unfamiliar recitations printed in faded Xeroxed ink. Names of the ancients: Pan, Set, Horus, Isis. Pen and ink sketches of goblins with empty eyes and tiny mouths. Strings of numbers in handwritten columns categorized by different shapes, alien and unrecognizable. "He's trying to change me," says John Michael, panicking. Looking up, he finds himself in the cockpit of the airplane, standing behind the pilots. He can see only the tops of their hats, and their hands gripping the control wheels, preparing for the crash landing. "My doctor, I've been seeing him my whole life, and he's been trying this whole time. This is how the virus spreads." The pilots are quiet. The jetliner closes its steep descent. The ocean is entirely frozen over. They hit the ice hard and slide for 3 or 4 seconds before starting to sink through and slow down. Shattered shards of frozen crust pile up around the nose of the plane, but the hull remains strong. They eventually reach a halt. John Michael and the 2 pilots exit out the nearest door into a silver, frozen world, spanning in all directions, bright white under the azure sky. The last thing he remembers before the sun breaks through the curtains of room 259 is a long walk alongside the 2 pilots towards the shore of a bright green jungle. yellow sand glowing vividly up through glassy sheets of ice at their feet. They are skating now, propelled by their makeshift jetpacks, up a frozen river at an otherworldly speed, into the wild woods. He can't keep up. He's diverted off onto a creek to the south, the woods sinking into darkness on all sides as clouds blanket the sky, while muffled shouts of the pilots begin to ring, terrified, through the air.